Well, the debt that most global South countries have taken on have not helped them develop, just the opposite. They've imposed a kind of neoliberal underdevelopment syndrome on countries. Loans from the IMF and the World Bank and private investors have contained conditionalities that I mentioned. These include not growing their own grain. The United States, the World Bank has given grants to countries to export plantation crops, but not to grow their own grain or any agricultural crops that compete with American farmers. The idea is to make other countries dependent on American grain so that it can fight them. If they go their own way, America can do what it tried to do to China in the 1950s. It says, don't export any grain, let's starve them out. Canada broke these sanctions and helped China get over it. But the United States says, well, for other countries, we want to keep them dependent on American grain and American oil. The World Bank has made loans for anything but food self-sufficiency. Now, these conditionalities imposed by the West include not legislating protective tariffs to help countries nurture their own import displacement. Free trade means letting the nations that already have invested in modernizing their agriculture and industry use this head start to undersell global South countries that have to undertake the expense of creating these means of production. Now, that makes trade dependency worse and worse, and it drives them even deeper into debt without their being able to invest in the means of getting out of this debt by their own production. And the result is debt dependency. That's the problem that they face and the problem that has to be solved. Well, the basic context is the fact that today's world is breaking into two quite different kinds of economy. You have neoliberal dependency on the US and NATO core, administered by local client oligarchies on the one hand. These countries have governments that are too weak to restrain oligarchies from taking over their economies and polarizing them. In Argentina, for instance, 1% of the economy, the wealthiest 1%, control the whole country and the government, and you've seen them just promote a new president that wants to just use the whole the US dollar is their currency, not their own currency. And to close down, he stopped all government spending on infrastructure, all government social spending, and said, let the free market work out things. We can make Argentina look just like Russia looked under Boris Yeltsin. And of course, that led to a huge population collapse and a huge economic collapse until the Russians decided, well, we don't really want neoliberalism and we don't want what's known as the Western mode of development, which isn't really how the West developed, but how the West has colonized financially and economically colonized other countries. So the basic context is that on the alternative to all of this is that you need government strong enough to invest in public infrastructure and provide basic needs and to prevent an oligarchy, a domestic wealthy financial class, from privatizing and taking over all of these public infrastructure and public investments that should naturally be run by governments, not by private monopolies. That's the alternative to this neoliberal plan is to have governments taking the lead. Basically, you've seen what China has done. You've seen what Russia has done. You've seen what Iran have done. They all have tried to prevent domestic oligarchies from developing, or if there is an oligarchy, to make sure that the wealthy people use their wealth to promote domestic capital investment and real capital formation, real economic growth, and act as essentially in the public interest rather than in their own private interest. That's called socialism because it promotes rising wages and living standards in order to enable it to become more productive. And the new group of nations, the BRICS nations, must be multipolar so that you can avoid dependency on the US and Europe by achieving your own critical mass. You don't need America and Europe if you can trade among yourselves. And for the time being, this is going to require China, Russia, and Iran to provide much of the support. But there's no other way in which you can become economically and politically independent. And I think certainly these countries recognize all of this. The creditor countries acting through the IMF try to insist on anti-labor, anti-union policies, economic austerity. The world majority has to do just the opposite. You don't get rich by impoverishing the labor force. You get rich by raising wages, raising living standards to make labor more productive. That is the great success story. And I guess the best example of the degree to which the United States and Europe have exploited the third world is Argentina. Again, very much in the news almost every week now. A century ago, Argentina seemed destined to be the wealthiest country in Latin America. It had all of the virtues. It had to be the most prosperous country in the world. It had land, it had natural resources, it wasn't yet debt-ridden, it seemed to have everything it needed, and yet Argentina ended up in the poorest country now of the world, despite all of its natural advantages. And that's because its oligarchy took over and essentially said, we want to get rich by impoverishing the rest of Argentina. And it became a client oligarchy of the United States. There was some attempt to develop Argentina along the lines that Brazil has been doing under Lula. And so the United States then attacked Chile, which had enacted a socialist government. And having overthrown the Chile and making a military dictatorship, the American CIA and State Department started Operation Condor of a terrorist assassination group that killed tens of thousands of labor leaders, university professors, land reformers, and anyone else who wanted to make their own countries independently wealthy. Most of the killings were in Argentina. So out of Chile, the CIA sent assassination squads that essentially took Chile's left-wing politicians, labor leaders, land reformers, everybody who wanted Chile to be independent was murdered. It was one of an even larger mass murder than in Chile. The United States made it very clear to the rest of the world, if you try to go it alone, if you try to use your wealth for your own benefit, not for our benefit in the United States, we're going to kill your leaders and cut off your intellectual head and prevent you from doing this. This is the vicious war that we're already in. The United States and Europe knows that they're at a war with the global South and the global majority and Eurasia. The question is, does Eurasia and the global South know that there's a war on? The United States says, well, we're all one happy family. There's a unipolar world. We're all part of the same world. Does Asia, Latin America, and Africa realize that we're not, if you are part of this world, you will end up like Haiti and Argentina and the other victims of American financial financial imperialism. That's the choice. The definition of an odious debt is a debt that is taken on internationally, not to benefit the borrowing country, but to benefit the creditor country. I think you should think of these debts not as simply bad debts, but bad loans. A bad loan is one that does not help finance debtors with the means to pay. Such lending is called unproductive. It's a loan. You can make a loan for countries to wage war. That doesn't help them develop. You can make a loan to essentially support the currency. As countries fall into a deeper and deeper trade deficit, you can make a loan so that you can the American and European firms can take their domestic earnings and shift them abroad at a high rate. But that's not productive. Most loans by the IMF have been to support global South currencies and help capital flight. They finance capital flight. And so whenever there is a thought of a left-wing president coming into being in Latin America, the wealthy people try to move their money out. Well, as they move the money out to a safe haven in the United States or Europe or the Caribbean islands, offshore banking centers, that leads their currency to decline. The IMF will make loans to this oligarchic country to support the currency so that they can move all of their domestic savings out. And then when a more left-wing president comes in, the IMF will let the currency collapse. And then the people will all of a sudden, as the currency collapses, they're going to find imports are more expensive, and political opposition will develop. And the IMF said, well, we'll make you a stabilization loan by supporting so that you can avoid this devaluation and restore your currency value. But as I mentioned earlier, you'll have to sell off your public infrastructure, and you'll have to privatize. And basically, you'll have to fight your labor force to make yourself more competitive. Well, fighting your labor force and lowering wages and fighting against labor unions does not make a country more competitive, because it prevents high wage labor from developing, high productivity labor from developing. It prevents labor from performing the tasks that are needed to help an economy grow. It's what's used to be called pauper labor, and educated labor. Now, obviously, if labor is better educated, has better health care, longer lifespans, it's going to be more productive. The United States does not want other countries' labor to be more productive. It wants to set them all against each other, fighting and just doing manual labor tasks. And this is now that they have mechanized production and artificial intelligence, there are fewer and fewer tasks for what the United States and the IMF and World Bank have forced countries into. So that basically the loans that have been given have been underdeveloping them, not developing them. They've helped create a system and pattern of world trade that has helped Europe and America get rich from the global South countries, but not the global South countries getting rich. The global South countries are further and further in debt. So the effect of these loans have not been to help the debtor, but to make the debtor's position worse and worse and worse. That's what an odious loan is. The loans, just on moral grounds, the loans should be wiped off the book. Well, there's no international court to promote international, let's say, bankruptcy. Even the International Monetary Fund says in America, when individuals can't owe more money than they can afford to pay, they have to live, they have to pay their food, so they can declare bankruptcy and wipe out the debts. Similarly for corporations, when a corporation goes under and say, well, we borrowed too much money, market conditions have gone down, but we don't want to fire all our workers, we want to remain in business, corporations could go bankrupt. There's no similar institution for Global South or any, other countries, debtor countries, to say we go bankrupt, we're wiping out the debt because our survival has to come first. The United States has made sure that there is no international court or body of international law that permits this. In order to free yourself from the bad debts that are holding you in bondage, you need not only to stop paying them, but you need to create your own international court to describe what kind of debts are predatory and unproductive, and what kind of debts have been taken on that actually do help you develop. We want a financial system internationally that will help you develop, not make you poor and poor and poor, which is exactly what's happened. The current system of international credit simply supports the capital outflow of profits and fees from the new American or European buyers of public utilities and basically bankrupt, broke governments. This system has to be stopped. And all of the policy should follow from the principle that this policy has to be stopped. And that stopping that policy, you have to realize, is going to create a break in world political relations and be part of the split that I'm talking about between the US NATO garden and the global majority. The reason for canceling foreign debts is because these debts did not provide the Global South and other countries with the means to pay. That's the character of dollar debts. The World Bank, as I mentioned, would make loans to produce export crops. They would essentially make the whole center of every Global South country the seacoast, because that's where they would send all of their exports. Their populations were put to work making exports for the wealthy countries, North America and Europe, not using their economic surplus to support their own development. And so, yeah, the U.S. economic strategists have essentially promoted economic dependency for this. There's no international law of bankruptcy, as I said, only for individuals. And bankruptcy it's a humanitarian law to free debtors from falling into dependency by enabling them to resume normal life. And as I mentioned, even the IMF itself, in its World Economic Outlook in 2012, calls for bold debt, household debt bankruptcy, but not really for third world debt bankruptcy, but that's what has to be done. The overriding consideration of the Global South countries should be to help recover. They have to recover the damage that they've suffered from financial colonialism since 1945. And the only source of this, as I mentioned, are the BRICS plus countries working together, led by the largest and most productive and successful economies, China, Russia, and so forth. Now, China's Belt and Road Initiative, for instance, has laid the groundwork for a multipolar interdependence that builds up productive powers and self-sufficiency of countries that are participating in it. This is not predatory debt. This debt is a precondition that will help other countries develop. Now, obviously, the countries can't immediately generate the money to pay this the economic surplus created by this long-term investment. So instead of having the short-term debt pressing over the shoulders. Obviously, China is taking it, is letting this debt be long-term debt. And that is the kind of policy that is the global South countries, if they lend to each other, can lend for their development, not for their underdevelopment. And they can realize it's a long-term build, the debts are going to build up. And if countries indeed grow as a result of the debt, some portion of their growth can be paid in debt service. If this debt proves to be unproductive and they don't take off and they've built ports and it hasn't helped them develop, then obviously they wouldn't have to pay China any more than they'd have to pay the United States. But the whole purpose of the Chinese plan is to revitalize the whole Eurasian economy and to link the Eurasian economy with the global South so that they all develop together. The idea of productive credit is to create an alternative economic system to neoliberalism. And we'll call that a socialist economic system, because that's really what it's always been called. And to a socialist economic system based on prosperity that will use borrowed money to is a catalyst to create domestic infrastructure and schooling and healthcare and factories and means of production, so you don't have to import foreign industrial goods. But essentially, the global South will do what Russia did when America imposed sanctions on it. It will produce its own livelihood, its own industrial and food needs, and not only its own all by itself, but in conjunction with an overall development, Africa-wide development, Latin America-wide, Eurasia-wide. The sphere of development won't be the narrow countries anymore that the United States has been able to divide and conquer the rest of the world to impose neoliberalism. It will be a socialist group of countries that will help each other develop, because the alternative, if you don't help each other develop, then you're going to fall back into dependency on American financial colonialism, and that's the one thing that you have to avoid. So this may entail resisting the US NATO military attacks, so that to protect your financial policy, you actually need a military defense pact, such as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, to prevent the kind of war that was waged against Cuba, Venezuela, Chile, Russia, China, Libya, and other countries. Libya is a case in point of when Libya tried to create its own gold-backed African currency, the United States and France got together, bombed it, and they stole all of Libya's gold. So that to stop Africa from developing its own currency. We have no idea what happened to Libya's gold. That was what Obama did with France. He said, we've got to prevent Africa from developing. The way we do it is to take away all this gold that was supposed to back its own financial system to be independent of the IMF. We've got to keep them dependent with an iron hand, destroy Libya. And the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, went and did this and cackled and laughed and said, we've destroyed them. We've tortured Mohammed Gaddafi. We came, we conquered, he died. That was what she said. And this is the kind of hatred that your independence and attempts to create independence is creating in the United States. And that's why the canceling, repudiating the debts to the United States is going to mean a world break, because it can't be maintained without really creating an alternative economic order on the basis of the BRICS have already begun to do.
就是我们必须将战争放在资本流转的一个大的背景下来思考。
当西方的资本可以通过新殖民主义的全球化，进一步推进它的产业资本扩张和金融资本扩张的时候，这个时候你们大家看到的都是各种各样的非常美好的说法，推进你们的改革，推进你们的开放，帮助你们的人民得到更好的福利等等。我们也都知道，世界上各个主要经济体都不是被外部问题造成的严重困境，而很大程度上都是内部问题造成的。
任何一个国家都应该尊重诚实劳动，不应该尊重攫取。
只有在一线政策部门，
对，
你才知道经济社会发展过程之间真实问题出在哪儿了。
有一个宏观的视野，能看到天下。